Let's give a couple of seconds till people join. Okay, let's kick it off. It looks like people are joining in slowly. Welcome, everyone. Really excited to have you all here. Today, we are launching something we have been working on quite for a while, NOPS GCP Commitment Management. Now, here's a big headline, as you can see on the slide. GCP commitments in 2026 are not set it and forget it anymore. With net new price billing and shifting in CET dynamics, and the old playbook that used to generate free savings can now quickly turn into a cost trap. That's very scary, I know that. And if you are managing GCP at scale, whether you're a FinOps leader, a cloud architect, an engineer, or a finance partner, this session might genuinely change how you think about commitments, especially in GCP. Cody, let's start here. For years, teams thought commitments were easy. Buy a CED, lock in savings, move on. But what's changed here?
Yeah, so the biggest shift is the move from the credit-based billing to basically net price billing. So in the old model, you had spend, then credits, and discounts layered on top. So it felt like savings were additive, and you had a lot of different negatives coming in. So as a practitioner, it felt very good. But in the new model, the commitment amount you specify is the discounted rate, not the on-demand amount you're committed against. And this is going to be a really big deal that we'll get into throughout this. It seems very subtle, Shuri, but it has big implications, especially for customers or people who came late into the upgrading to this new model, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Financially, it's very different, right? The free savings era is gone. So yeah, we'll be talking more about this in the session, and quick housekeeping things before we jump into the session right away. Today's live will be approximately 30 minutes. We'll start exploring just as a brief introduction about GCP financial changes, billing changes, commitments changes, and how CUDs will be applied and everything, and the strategies you can follow, risk mitigation, and also walk through adaptive laddering, which is common practice in FinOps space, and the real-world playbook with the new changes. And we'll take questions from the audience. Please use the LinkedIn Live comments to post your questions. And today's session will be recorded, and it will be available on LinkedIn, so you can view it again, or you can share it across your colleagues or teammates. Awesome. Yeah, what is the biggest 2026 GCP billing shifts, Cody? We have been talking about savings era is over and everything. What is the main shift that's happening?
Yeah, so just old world, you have your fee, your usage, and your credit. 3 lines to reconcile. New world, you have the discounted price baked in. So list price next to it, done. So why does this matter? This fundamentally changes how you analyze commitments in 2026, right? So I encourage anyone, if you read the text below in the console before you make this purchase, it says you are no longer making on demand, you're doing the discounted. So if you're a customer or someone who basically did these late and now you make that purchase, if you just renew the same thing you had, say $70 an hour, right? Just to make it simple. That $70 an hour will now cover a lot more than you originally intended. So sure, as you can imagine, as a FinOps practitioner, if you do this and you mess up, you can incur your company a lot of costs just by renewing the same thing that you originally had done. So that small change is what I really want to highlight, that if you're someone who is making these purchases, make sure you are actually analyzing what you're doing. And if you go into Google documentation, funnily enough, and you read how to do the calculation yourself, they say, yeah, it's too hard. Don't worry about it. Just use our recommendations, which to me is crazy, right? So you need to be very mindful of what you're doing. And the other big change is your old billing data, say you did it very late into the 2026, right to the edge, it doesn't suddenly get magically updated to the newest billing, right? It all is legacy billing that you now need to normalize if you were doing your savings, right? This is a big deal for customers, right? Like if you're suddenly doing your savings and all your stuff breaks, well, yeah, they changed the model, right? So these two big changes do have real consequences for teams that they need to refactor. They now need to normalize, and they need to make sure they're making the purchases correct. So as you
So
can imagine, it seems simple, but that's not the case, Sherry.
exactly. I thought it's just a billing UI change. Oh, line item will be a different name and stuff. Definitely, it's not sounds the same thing. It's a huge financial exposure change because your $70 commitment is not $70 worth anymore, right? It's a different dollar value right now, and that's calves across FinOps teams. And now add in another layer where your billing reports, dashboards, allocation, cogs that you have built previously does not matter or are in the same form anymore again. So it's a lot of things for FinOps practitioners or FinOps teams out there who are dealing with GCP. So it's not just UI change, guys. Just be careful when you're flipping it, where you don't have dependency on these things, right? That's scary, but hey, they're normalizing across all the clouds. So I get it. I get it. Uh, Jumping into the other thing, right? I heard the concept SUTs, and what's happening with it because there is no latest news from them from GCP around sets. Are they getting deprecated? What's happening around sets in general?
So suds will continue to be there for their current machine families, right? But they are technically being deprecated for new machine families. They don't use them. So the idea behind suds for Google originally was, if you were moving to the cloud, you weren't going to take advantage of all the elasticity, right? That just wasn't going to happen. So what they did is they said, hey, you come to our cloud, we'll give you free discounts for just running your workloads here, right? And for N1 specifically, it was up to 30%. That's pretty good for doing nothing. It's a 30% discount. But as you can imagine, Shuri, this causes a lot of confusion now still, right? It was only on the older generations this is a thing. So when a lot of, we've had customers come to us where when they modernize, right, they go, why did my bill skyrocket? Because they were accounting for a 30% discount that they're not getting. Google is not putting suds or, they're just not doing it anymore. Anything new, nothing has subs, right? N1s, M1s, N2s. These are all like 6 to 8 year old machine families that people are moving off of. So FinOps practitioners will account for suds when they're upgrading. They do the upgrade, they get hit with a massive bill, and they're like, what's going on here? So it is quite confusing, and I think Google should probably come out and say something about it because it still gets brought up to like today, right? So
Exactly. I have a great opinion on sets. Okay, here's the opinion of my side. Okay, I've been done migrations and modernizations for companies for past 6 years or so, and there I've been a FinOps practitioner for past 4 years or so. And the FinOps in me loves sats.
mhm.
I don't need to commit. It's a freebie. I'm getting discount for something I'm not even purchasing or financially committing to. But the engineer and the architect in me says, these are legacy. My application is going to die if I keep running on them. It's a volatility, right? The more containers, more cross regions, auto scaling, mixed workloads, applications are getting modernized, and these legacy architecture or infrastructure can't work with them, right? That makes sense from a static commitments, but still, I love sats, but would love to see them on new machines. But that makes sense because GCP is trying to tease customers and entice customer to move on to them right away because you're getting free that 30% discount for doing nothing, and
Yeah,
then slowly you move to the new one and they have to do commitments, right?
exactly. Like suds in that theory, right, are awesome. I agree with you, Shuri. Like from a FinOps, like you said, you do nothing and you get free savings, right? Like how
Right.
who doesn't love that, right? And I think that it was such a good play when they originally did it to move into the cloud, right? And then as a FinOps practitioner, you can focus on other areas of your FinOps practice, right? Rather than savings, which takes a massive amount of time if you're doing it by properly, right? So that was the big thing. Again, love them, but Google just they don't want them anymore. They're moving you towards the committed use discounts.
Exactly. I mean, with all these complexity increases and commitments getting risky, that's where I think most teams start playing what we call commitment Tetris. I think we'll talk about it slowly in the next few slides, but that's going to get very interesting. But before jumping into the commitment Tetris that we want to talk about, right? Let's see the main differences between resource-based cuts and spend-based or flex cuts, we call it, right? Uh, Very simple fashion. Resource-based cuts are deeper savings, higher savings you can gather, paying to your machine, family, region, right? Whereas flex cuts, which is nothing but spend-based cuts, moderate savings, it follows your spend across multiple services, right? And what's a misconception here, Cody, in between these two things?
Yeah, a lot of people immediately, like especially in the FinOps world, will just go to flex cuts or spend-based cuts, right? They'll immediately jump to that, and I get why. It's the flexibility, flex cut, right? It allows you to not have to worry about your workloads, but that truly does come at a cost. Flex cuts do not save as much as resource-based commitments, right? And that's just a fact. They do not. They'll never save as much. Even a 1-year resource-based cut is competitive with a 3-year flex cut. And just for people, not every single machine family is coverable by flex cuts. So we had a customer who bought a $70 an hour savings plan because they were like, oh, I have the usage. It was T2D. It can't even be covered by flex cuts. So that was a whole fiasco of dealing with that, right? They can only be covered by resource based. That's what I mean. You have to be very mindful of these edge cases because they have massive dollar ramifications in Google if you're not paying attention to those little edge cases.
I wonder how these GCP recommendations work in this case. Like, I bought a $70 and I realized after buying it, oh, it can be applied on these resources. And how could even someone figure it out, especially with GCP recommendations in picture here?
Yeah, like you really have to be digging in and paying attention to this, right? There's so many details around commitments, right? And I'll hear a lot, GCP is the easy one. And then we run into, with customers where they're like, what happened here? Like, I thought it was easy. It's like, yeah, it's easy, but it's only easy when you know all of this and you're paying attention to it. I mean, Google is constantly modernizing their commitment area, right? This new spend base is massive. They're adding new ways to modify, right? Like, I highly doubt Google is going to stop changing this, right? If anything, they're going to change it more over the next few years. That's what I think is probably going to happen for the Google side.
So they are like modernizing commitments, which is great. But yeah, like as a customer, it's really hard if you don't know your organization at scale, especially when you don't have common syncs with your engineering team on what's their plans and everything, then you're trapped.
Exactly.
It's another type of commitment trap there, right? Yeah. So with these kind of, commitment traps, what comes in picture is you can hit 99% coverage with resource cuts, right? But with only using flex cuts, your blended savings rate drop, right? So if you think of flexibility versus discounts I'm getting versus how much coverage I have, with blended, which is combination of spend-based cuts, resource-based cuts, it gives you the best coverage and best usage and best discount rates because you are mixing and throwing up the resource-based ones. With your $70 one, that a scenario of one of the customer experience, Cody, right? So if they are, they're going only with flex-based cuts, which they're assuming a higher coverage and higher discount rates, but coverage is only dropping because there are some resources that can be covered with flex-based cuts, and the savings also drop. Now, throw in our resource-based cuts over there, your savings jump, your whole coverage jumps, and that's where the blended comes in picture, right?
Yeah, and blended is just, I agree 100% sure. Blended is just honestly the best way to go. What we'll see is a lot of people say, I'm just going to buy a 3-year, $100 an hour, $150 an hour flex cut, spend base, right? And when they do this, you're locking in for an entire 3 years. You're betting against no changes in your architecture in regards to spend. AI isn't going to change things change things up, right? A blended gives you risk mitigation, the best discounts, and it's making sure you're taking advantage of what Google wants you to, which is resource-based 1 and 3 year, as well as FlexCut 1 and 3 year, right? Flex only seems so attractive, Sherry. It really does. Like you buy it once, you're done, right? But if you do that, that's not best practice, right? Like even architecture, right? Sherry, you can't just look at them one and done. You always have to come back to it and make these, analyze it basically.
So in a way, I would say of a laddering strategy or something like that. I want something that I want to make some savings instead of paying full price. I want some savings, doesn't matter how much I get, even a penny saved is a penny saved, I can show to my finance team. Then I believe flex-based cuts make sense over there. Slap one flex-based cut, done, move on from the day, say that you're saving some money and stuff. But if you want the best out of everything and make everything possible, I feel like blended is the best option over here. and it's the best strategy, right? And
100.
yeah, this is where it gets interesting, right? We were talking about the commitment Tetris just like a couple of minutes ago, right? And the most interesting part, I love the visual especially. And we think about commitments in three layers in general at all times. The first one is foundation. Foundation is basically nothing but stable. This legacy application or applications that cannot change or does not change or not even driven. That's like bread and butter for the whole thing. It's the heart of the service of or your core foundation of your whole company. So those things which run on the VMs, that's where you go with resource-based cuts, right? Like that's a foundation. You're getting the maximum best out of what you can do there. And then the next one is like agile layer, where you have event-driven architecture coming in, which is like cross-region, cross-traffic, cross-family, and all that stuff. That's where you go with flex-based cuts. And the peak, which is like what's left out there after, which is we move to cloud for event driven. When there is a traffic spike that happens like to the peak one, which happens once a day or once a week or once a month or so, that peak is still going to stay as on demand because it's used it's used in that architecture deliberately to be as less volatile as possible, right? Why is this layered model in general so powerful, Cody?
Yeah, just, I love the commitment Tetris. You'll hear many practitioners have different ways of doing this. I personally love the Tetris model. It just makes so much sense to me from how you have to basically piece and slot everything in perfectly. But it basically aligns to workload stability, right? And you touched it, Sherry, right? Every commitment you make should have a place and a reason of why you're making that purchase, right? Again, stable baseline, resource cuts, right? That could be for a bank like your SAP systems, right? You're very like, this is not being touched for a while. Why would I put a flex cut on that? I will put resource cuts on it, right? I know it's not moving. And that means that you have to go talk to your engineers. And I think that that's why I really like the commitment Tetris is it really pushes you as a FinOps practitioner to go and speak with your engineers, speak with your architects and say, hey, what are we doing here at these workloads, right? Should I put it into the more stable resource cuts and get us way more savings over the year that we can then reinvest? Or is this going to be moving soon, right? Should we put it in the agile layer? And then maybe we have, seasonal spikes, right? Maybe your company, December is like your rock month with making all the sales. Okay, we'll leave that on demand, no problem, right? And then when you come back to your stable baseline, it'll all get eaten up by your agile layer and your resource cuts, right? So it just allows you as a company, because companies have different needs, right? Banks versus, you selling, ski stuff in December, right? It allows you to actually put your commitments where they should be for your business, right? So you just follow the model, you go and actually go out to your teams and talk to them. And as a FinOps practitioner, you should be doing this. You should be going and talking to your engineering. If you're not meeting with them, I would say, sure, right, me and you talk quite a bit. If you're not talking with your engineers at least once a week, right, as a FinOps practitioner, that's not good. I think that you need to be doing that in order to do commitments properly. If you're doing this all by hand, right? That's the big thing.
I mean, like, yeah, exactly. That's a great point, Cody. Like, they have to go hand in hand to get the best out of everything and to get the best out of both worlds, right? You don't want to commit something that is going to go underutilized. It could be resource cut or like flex cut where, oh, we ran tests for past 1 year. We're shutting down all of it. 90% will be gone. Now, if you don't know that information, you got into a commitment trap there as well, right? So I 100% agree with you, Cody, that there has to be a constant communication between engineering and the FinOps teams in general. And what are the most common mistakes in GCP commitments? Any ideas here, Cody?
So the biggest one is basically they make one big purchase at the beginning of a quarter or year, and that big purchase will cover 80% of the workloads, maybe 90, right? And when you do that, you are putting yourself in so much risk. You have one end date. And as a FinOps practitioner, you never want to be a blocker. So I find that FinOps teams more nowadays are becoming blockers to engineering decisions. This is the worst case scenario for a FinOps practitioner because you are telling your business or organization you are not allowed to modernize because if you do, it's going to be tons of spend in regards to if you do. So now you're going to be double paying, right? So that is the most common one that I see is buying it once a year or once a quarter and never looking at it again. And in the first month, you get major kudos, awesome job. But in a year when they need to modernize for business requirements, you now have to say, oh, sorry, I actually made a 3-year commitment. You have to stay on this. So obviously you can see, Sherry, this is very, This is very problematic for FinOps practitioners, and they run into this a lot.
Exactly. And I love this slide because it's one of my favorites, to be honest. Uh, I call this top the Clifford, right? Because let's assume this. You have a big red expiration event coming up, which is either every 1 year or every 3 years. For example, I'm a layman FinOps practitioner. I bought these all resource-based cuts and flex-based cuts. Doesn't matter. I got some cuts, and these are 1 year and 3 years. I bought them. I'm laid back, enjoying my day. Savings are being pumped in every day, day in, day out for next 1 year and 3 years. And then there is the panic when it comes. The third year or the first year ends. That's where the red expiration event comes in. That's when you're like, no, what should I do here? Should I buy more? Should I stay the same? Should I increase my commitments? How would I do it? That's where I believe it has to ladder. That's where the commitment strategy of laddering, which is nothing but adaptive laddering, comes into picture, because you want to stop that cliff where you are completely jumped onto the cliff and you're at the peak. And then the first year and or third year in comes, you're just dropping there because you don't know what to do there. You either stay same or go up or drop. You don't know. You don't have flexibility there. That's where adaptive laddering comes into picture, giving you that flexibility that you're looking for. You don't look for long term. So you look a combination of things. You can also call this wedding cake layer approach, or adaptive laddering, where the first base layer, if you remember the Tetris model, the base layer, right? Base layer goes in with the longer term, the longest possible, which are never be touched, never be changed and stuff. And then you go with short-term resource adjustments, which are resource-based cuts, right? You just keep buying every day or every week or bi-weekly and stuff for the short-term resource-based cuts. And then you have flex-based cuts, which are very short-term as possible, changing them, exchanging them, returning them. It could be 10,000 different things based on the cloud you're in. And with those things, you get the more flexibility, right? In a short term, Cody, why do you think I love this model? I love this visual, and it clearly explains what does adaptive laddering do, right? But why does adaptive laddering can reduce risk, or how does this can help in reducing the risk that an organization can hold?
For sure. And, just going back to that blocker thing, right? Sure, for FinOps, right? What it allows basically FinOps practitioners to do is, now when architecture decisions get changed, you now can just say, yeah, sure, I have end dates for whenever you need to do your migrations. It'll fire off, no big deal, right? And then you start covering the new batch and you're getting more savings overall. So reducing your risk and commitments is the name of the game, right? You really want to be managing your risk with your savings, and doing laddering, right? You will get a little bit less savings at the start, but long-term for business health, this is the way to go. You're going to have various end dates. You now become a partner. This is a super big deal, right? In regards to how you're able to function within the organization. And I think that this is where FinOps practitioners want to get to, right? They want to get to that partner, right? Or not being blockers. And then this gives them that ability. And the thing is, laddering is very intensive. So that's why a lot of practitioners don't do it. You need to, ideally, the more you make purchases, the better, right? The more end dates you have, the better. The more spread it is, the better. But the issue is, right, as a FinOps person, I understand, right? It takes a lot of time to do this on top of all the other demands that is coming for a FinOps practitioner.
I think you summarized it well as how it can reduce risk and the advantages of it. I think you made a good point. The more expiration dates I have, the better it is. So if I have things expiring every day, that's great, because my ultimate expiry date is shorter than 1 year or shorter than 3 years, right? So I think that's where NOps comes in picture, right? The automation commitment management. There are many tools out there, let's be honest, but NOps has some uniqueness about how we do laddering. And if you go to other clouds, we have very more unique solution that can go beyond the limitations of adaptive laddering, which can cover, doesn't matter how much you spend or how peak or how large your spikes are. We have more advanced solution in other clouds too. But when it comes to GCP, adaptive laddering still gets you what and where you need to be at, right? And we launch and we go in a three-step approach. First one is observe, get your real-time usage and growth. When we talk about real-time, we're not looking at your focus data or FinOps data or any kind of billing data. We're looking directly from your GCP accounts, what you're running every hour. So that's like a real-time data that we talk about. And then we calculate it, because let's assume this, it's a pieces of puzzle. Now, in the beginning, it's easy to calculate, But as you add more expiration dates, as you add more commitments, your commitments about FinOps, you have a whole 10,000 or 30,000 commitments that could be at different terms and different prices, values, resources, and stuff. You have to figure out which one goes well with which one, maximizing the discount, reducing the risk, reducing the duration, right? So you have to do all these calculations in real time within a span of seconds, minutes, if possible, probably 2-3 minutes, but cannot go beyond like 3-4 minutes. You have to do it in real time on the fly, that to quick fashion. And the final thing is executing it. Like now I got the perfect piece of puzzle that gives you the maximum discount and lower risk, and you have to adjust all the things in real time, all the commitments in real time before the waste or cliffs appear, right? And the key here is you have to adjust the ladder before the waste happens. So you have to be proactive, not reactive, right? That's the key. That's where NOps shines really, right? Any thoughts you want to add here, Cody?
Yeah, so let me bring this around to what we were talking about. Remember, I was saying you should be meeting with your engineers every week, right? I was in that place as a FinOps lead, right? I was meeting with the engineers every week, right? I was very involved, and this took up a lot of my time. I was trying to ladder a little bit better than what I would say is the general, right? And I was trying to do the ladder at my company every month, right? That was very intensive to do, right? And that time commitment was I had so many things as a FinOps practitioner that you need to do, and our scope is getting bigger as FinOps professionals, right? Sure, like all the time, you see FinOps org. So a tool like this literally will save you so many hours, and now you know that you're going to be risk mitigated, right? And in the world where AI is constantly changing things, I think the business value this excites me. Right? This is the whole point of why I was like, yeah, I want to come to FinOps. I want to build like this is amazing. And I would have loved this tool when I was a FinOps practice lead for the sole reason that it saves time, right? I just don't have enough time to analyze this, and I can't beat hourly. I think that's a big thing, Sherry. Like, even if I'm like, you know what, I'm going to do it, I'll never beat an hourly automated, basically management system. It's never going to happen.
Exactly. And even if I build it, it always comes down to cost benefit analysis. How much time is money? Let's be honest. A resource is spending their time on XYZ product or build the same automation it has. It takes time. And time is money in all these organizations. How much time they're spending on these automation, how much it can save them and everything, rather than they can just get a tool like enough, slap it there, get savings, be risk-free, and save the same amount or greater amount of money, right? That's where it comes in, right? And then it's the final $1,000 audition, I call it, it is a reality, in large GCP environments, delaying commitments can cost like thousands of dollars per hour, not even days, per hours, because you're in a suboptimal rate, not because you're overspending widely, just because the not knowing the best blended rates or best combination for your own environment will create these inefficiencies there. And what is the most common mistake, Cody, do you think that people do here?
And this is where really analysis paralysis comes in, Sherry, right? Like you have so many decisions and micro decisions you need to make in regards to this. And when you're making that purchase, you're making $500,000 commitments, $1 million commitments, right? I was making between 5 to 10 and $1 million commitments, right? If I mess that up, right, that comes back on you as a professional. And so what a lot of people do is nothing. We had a customer where they had an expiration. They had no clue what to do for about 6 months, and it cost them $100,000, right? USD.
Yeah,
Just by doing nothing, they lost that money, right? So that's where I think that teams wait for the perfect visibility, but volatility doesn't wait, right? Your workloads are going to get even more volatile over time. So if you're laddering properly, though, as we went over, this shouldn't be an issue. But again, that's where that hourly ladder comes in, where you no longer have to worry. Whereas a FinOps professional, you just can't do that.
exactly. Otherwise, you'll be in a trap, right? Uh, Perfect. We're right about the time. I'm just gonna take a couple of questions. We have a few questions here. Let's get into the question and answers. Let's take it really quick. Uh, as you guys know, commitments are not buying about discounts. It's about optimizing and managing it the optimal way. I got a question here from a customer. Let's just post it here. Okay, every year renewals are fragile, and we end up either overcommitting or doing nothing. What's a practical way to stagger commitments so that we don't get stuck with a huge renewal cliff?
I
That's
mean, I would say NOps would be a good option for you. But if you're trying to do it right, you can ideally at least get to every quarter where you're making purchase decisions, right? It's not perfect. You're going to still run into a lot of issues. You still are going to have fire drill issues doing this, but you will be better than what we see 90% of people doing if you're just doing quarterly, right? If you want to do hourly and you want to make sure that this is no longer a fire drill, obviously I would say NOps, our tooling, can help you out a ton. But again, just get into the quarterly rhythm. That will at least get you started, and then you won't be dealing with such a big Clifford. Right now, it's every quarter, which a lot of businesses can at least align to. But again, I'm going to say that's what I was trying to do, and I still ran into issues doing that model, right? And when you get into monthly buys, it's going to be tough. That's what I'll say.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we don't have any more questions. This is the final one and the only one we got for today's session. Really appreciate your time, Cody, and really appreciate everyone joining. If you have any questions, please reach out to me or anyone in our team or in our company. We're happy to join and give you a free savings analysis and see how risky your commitments are right now and how can we save you more compared to what you're doing. We are like the cream de la cream, right? You want the best of the best. Just let us look at it. It doesn't hurt just for someone to look at it, right? It's like a free consultation just to give you a health check of what your commitments and how your commitments are doing. And once again, thanks for joining, everyone. Really appreciate it. Have a wonderful day. Bye.
Thanks.